Okay, so before I move on to question 8, I just wanted to ask for question 6. They ask us to find 13% of 600. I wanted to think about what percentages or benchmarks can we use to help us find 13%. Okay, so to do this, we could think of it as, we could think of 13% as 10% plus 1%. That's something we don't know how to do yet. Plus 1% plus 1%. Okay, so that's a way to do that. And so what we're going to do is I'm going to ask you to hold off on doing question 6, because we haven't talked about how to do 1%, but that is definitely in our plan. So I'm going to ask you to come back to doing question 6 after we talk about how to do 1%. Okay, and this lesson is going to be taught on a video call with Constance. Okay, so make sure this is the new lesson that's going to be taught with Constance. So make sure you attend on Monday to do to Constance video call to learn how to find 1%. Okay, so hold off on this question until then, but at least you have the start of it. Once you do that, then come back and do this question. Okay, in the meantime, I'll let you try question 7 for your on your own, and we're going to move on to question 8. So question 8 says Laureen earns $2,400 per month. Her share of the rent in her apartment is $600 per month. What percent of her income does Laureen spend on rent? This question is interesting, because now they don't give us the percent. They're asking us what is the percent, but they give us the amount of that percent, right? This is what she earns, so I guess that's her starting amount, because she earns that amount. And then it says it tells us her rent is that per month, but they're asking us what percent of this amount does she spend on rent. So what percent of this amount does this rent charge represent is what they're asking us. Okay, so let's use, I could actually write that on this paper. Let's use the benchmark percent, the benchmark method. Okay, I don't know what the percent is, so we actually have to figure that out. So I can't even put the percents up here because we don't know. But what we do know is the starting amount. We know the starting amount is $2,400 per month, and whatever the percent is, it's that percent is representing the percent of this amount that is her earnings. And when we find that that percent, the percentage would be the amount she's spending on her rent per month. So, and they tell us that they says her rent is $600 per month. So I don't know what the percent is, but whatever that percent is, this is the percentage of that percent for this amount, if that makes sense. Okay, so what are we saying? We're saying some percent, or 600 is some percent of 2,400. Okay, so what do we ask? We're saying 600 is what percent of 2,400? That's the question here. Okay, So maybe we could do some trial and error. Okay, what percents do we know how to find? Well, we know how to find 50%. Let's test that and see what happens. Okay, what if she spent 50% of her income? Do you think that would amount to 600? What is 50% means? 50% means half of the starting amount. So half of this amount would be how much? It wouldn't be 600, right? Half of 2400, half of 2400 is actually 1200. So would 600 represent 50% of the starting amount? No, right? 600 being her rent is not 50% of her income. So this rent amount would not be 50% of her income, because 50% of her income is 1200, not 600. So, and we can't change this amount because that's what her rent is. So that means this percent is not right. So my question to you now is 50% too much? Should it be a larger percent that we should find, or should it be a smaller percent that we need to find? Well, if 50% was 1200 and that's too much, we shouldn't find a bigger percent, we should find a smaller percent, right? Okay, so 50% is not correct because it's too much. We want less than 1200. What about 25%? Do you think that'll work? Let's try that. Half means 50%, right? Half of the starting amount means 50%. That's what 50% means. Okay, so now let's try to find 25%. Well, 25% means half of 50%. Isn't that what we said 25% means from phase 1? Well, to find 25%, if we find 50% first, which we already did up here, 50% of that starting amount would be 1200, but then 25% would be half, like we said, half of 50%. Well, that is the 50%. So half of this amount is, look at that, it is 600. So this, and 600 is what we were going for. They tell us that this 600 is her rent per month. So what percent did it take of this amount of this income to get 600? It took 25%. So that means 600 is 25% of this amount, 2400. So the question is, what percent of her income did she spend on rent? She spent 25% of her income on rent. 25% of this income would give us the $600 a month they told us she spent on rent. Okay? Now that was a challenge question. So a nice method is to try thinking of the percents you know how to find and testing them on this percent, and testing them on the starting amount to see if you come to the result in question. Okay? And there you go. I'll let you try the rest on your own.